Welcome to the Kourting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting and Kourting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in Courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 121. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. I am so happy that you're here. Well, it's hard to believe that it's a month into the new year. And last episode, we talked about building your well-being strategy. And you can learn more by going to the episode page of this podcast, which is at drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 121. You have an opportunity to actually download a free well-being journal. And you can learn more about that in the previous episode. So this episode, I'm going to talk about something that I'm asked about a lot. And I'm often asked about the publications or books that I recommend the most. And I ask this usually when I'm conducting a workplace well-being training, or if I'm serving as a guest speaker, or having a speaking engagement talking about positive psychology, or just simply when someone is like, wow, you're a happiness scholar? Like, what is that? And how can I don't know, be happier? And so I say all this to say that I love sharing these lists or these information or making recommendations. Matter of fact, when I was in my PhD program, many of the members of my cohort would call me the connector. I just love being able to connect people and connect them with all this different material and different publications that are going to serve them. Well, CNBC has published an article about the top picks to help you feel fulfilled in life and at work, and they're all my recommendations. How about that? So they're recommendations based on what I recommend as a happiness scholar. And I will say this, and I say it often, books can truly help us flourish. And these top picks will help you do just that and more. It will help you with your life. It can also help you understand the science of happiness. And it will begin to help you see the calling in your work. Plus, because you're listening to this podcast, of course I have to give you more, right? Plus, I'm going to share a big bonus that you can't find in the CNBC article. But you can read the article and check out my bonuses, this bonus that is, by going to the episode page of this podcast. And once again, it's drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 121. Almost forgot the podcast in that. Can't forget that. So when you visit the episode page, you can also purchase those picks right there on the page, and your purchase, I can't say this enough, helps this podcast. It will help support the podcast and its mission. So I certainly hope you visit and see if you want to buy maybe one or all three, and in this case, all four of those picks, because remember, I'm going to share a bonus with you in this episode. So let's talk about the first book. Well, This one is literally the first book my mentor in my PhD program recommended. My mentor, who teaches positive psychology at the University of Florida and also has a book of his own, and and ironically enough is also one of my top picks. I'll share that with you in a moment. But my first book that I'm recommending is a book that, gives so much great, powerful information. And it's also written by a scholar that I truly greatly admire. And she does, I don't know if hopefully she listens to this podcast. And if she does, she's also one of my dream guests. For this podcast one day. So hopefully maybe she's listening. We happen to be Facebook friends, but I hope she's listening to this podcast because she is certainly one of my dream guests. And the book is The How to Happiness, A New Approach to Getting the Life You Want by Sonia Lemersky. And I tell you, Dr. Lemersky, you are a dream guest for this podcast, but I don't want to digress too much in terms of talking about how much I'm just an amazing fan of her work. So, okay, let's talk about what this book provides. And it provides more about the science of happiness. It also will help you understand kind of like the formula, being a kind of a piece of cake. In this case, I mean a pie, because Dr. Lemersky shares how much happiness is under your control in a pie chart. Yes, a pie chart that I often share and discuss. And in the pie chart, it shares that about 50% is determined by our genes. 10% of our happiness is determined by our life circumstances. So if you're doing the math, you're saying, well, what about the 40%, right? Which means the 40% is by intentional activities, which is really good news because it shows a deeper understanding how positive activities or positive interventions can serve you in your happiness goals. And by the way, if you're familiar with one element that can help you is this podcast, of course, because you learn about building your well-being strategy, and then also these positive activities that you can include in your strategy. So this book is so powerful in sharing, again, the how to happiness and how you have so much control to being able to meet your happiness goals. So, second book, I feel like I need a drum roll, but the second book on the list is another must for your library. I like to call it your happiness library. I certainly call mine the happiness library. This person is also a dream guest. I feel like I'm spending a lot of time talking about how much I am an incredible fan of all the authors, and I really am. I think that also speaks to how authentic and, how authentic this is, how the fact that I highly value their work says so much, and also speaks to a level of how much I admire them in regards to the great work that they're doing. And so the second book it's amazing, but it is fierce. It's Fierce Self-Compassion, How Women Can Harness Kindness to Speak Up, Claim Their Power, and Thrive. And it's by Dr. Christian Neff. And practicing self-compassion, I often share this as well, is a key strategy in our self-care. It's about really helping us speak to ourselves with kindness. Isn't that just so important, right? Sometimes, some of us may hear those negative voices in terms of, that's not speaking kindly to you, right? Or better yet, you may find yourself saying harsh things to yourself. What I love so much about Dr. Neff's work, it speaks to the importance of speaking kindly to you, speaking kindly to yourself, speaking kindly and loving yourself every step of the way. In Dr. Neff's book, you can learn about the power of self-compassion and finding your voice. And yes, the fierce self-compassion focuses a lot as it relates to women, but I feel it can benefit across any gender. However, my big bonus is her book, Self-Compassion. And that book focuses on the science of self-compassion, the value of self-compassion. It really gives a lot of insight. I love the fact that Dr. Nives also shares she shares pieces of her life, which I feel draws an even deeper connection, that she's so vulnerable in her book, and to share levels as it relates to the journey and the importance of self-compassion. So my bonus is, if you're saying, well, fear self-compassion, I'm not sure about that. Maybe because you're like, specifically for women or whatever the case may be. There's no judgment here. But there's also self-compassion. And it's a book that I also highly recommend as it relates to understanding the great work of not only Dr. Christian Neff, but also the pioneering work as relates to self-compassion that she leads and does so well in terms of giving us the understanding of science, but then also giving us self-practices, some practices that we can really adopt within our daily lives. And so you can find her practices actually on drkortnialston.com. Again, I often talk about her doing training sessions and highly recommend her work. And so that is my bonus. That is my bonus that's not mentioned in the CNBC article, but I certainly wanted to mention to all of you as it relates to Kourting Happiness. So what about that third recommendation? We're already kind of hinted toward about it. And my third recommendation, again, is a person that has just been an inspiration to me, has opened my eyes to the world of positive psychology. He was my dissertation mentor and really provided advice that still guides me to this very day. And his book is called Make Your Job a Calling. Make Your Job a Calling. How the psychology of vocation can change your life at work. I always want to say positive psychology. So, but it's Make Your Job a Calling. How the psychology of vocation can change your life at work. And it's by not only my doctoral mentor, Dr. Ryan Duffy, but the co-author of he has a co-author, and they published so much great work together, is Dr. Brian Dick. And so this book is so life-changing. So if you're ready to take your job literally to the next level, this book is for you. Doctors Duffy and Dick will teach you the difference between calling and career and a job, as well as giving you a deeper meaning in terms of meaningful work, how it can be transcendent. And I just love the fact that it talks about the real deep dynamics concerning work. And I highly recommend taking on these books as individuals, so you can do it with yourself, right, in terms of reading it. But then I also think it's great to do it with groups of people. I've highly recommended these books to people in my circle, my friends, people I work with. I highly recommend it. These are great books for book clubs, honestly. And as a professor, I also recommend these books in the classroom for undergraduate and graduate work across disciplines, because all of these books can help serve on any level, in terms of any level of different disciplines, business structures, and industries. So you can learn more by visiting the webpage of this podcast at drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 121. Didn't want to miss it this time. That's drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 121. Now you know my top picks, and you even know my bonus too. So I also want you to remember this, that I always want you to remember that your well-being is your most important job, and I'm always here to help. Thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortnialston.com. That's podcast@drkortnialston.com. Join us on Instagram at Kourting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Kourting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your Kourting Happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.